All right, everyone, it's time for an end-of-decade literary update, giving sales totals, talking about a few of the titles and where it goes from here. First, I would like to say sales have been robust, quite good. From the beginning of 2018, January 1st. This is as far back as I can go on KDP to actually see sales totals. I don't know why they do that, because it's like, it's not going to take you that much effort. For the 10 people that'll actually go back further than 2 years, you should maintain it for at least, I'd say, 4 or 5. Anyway, as far as paperbacks go, some of the titles are available digitally, but I don't use digital books. I don't like Kindle. I like paperbacks, so I'm only calculating them. I've sold since January 1st of 2018 68,832 paperbacks. I would say that's fairly significant. That's pretty good considering, and you got to understand, some titles, of course, are labor of love titles where you only sell 5 or 6 copies over the course of a year, and then sometimes you sell thousands. And it can be hard to tell, actually, sometimes what people will be more into. Like, I figured that the Lesser Keys would be one of the biggest sellers. Instead, it's supplanted by several other grimoires that I never would have guessed were more popular. Some of the divination works actually sell fairly decently, despite the fact that I never expected anyone would even know they existed. So it can be a surprise. That's why I try to cast the net as widely as possible when I'm editing occult works, because you never know what people are going to be more or less interested in. Sometimes it just sort of clicks, and then sometimes someone makes a blog post, and then all of a sudden 100 other people want a copy. So it can go like that. It can be very, very sporadic, very unpredictable. First and foremost, there are links in the description to my books blogs, the Blogspot and the WordPress. There are also going to be links, and I'll pin a comment up for the YouTube audience as well on this, and I'll probably pin one on BitChute as well, or at least pop it there. I don't know, can you pin comments on BitChute? If not, you should be able to, by the way, just a hint there. To 3 of the specific works that I'm choosing sort of as the works of the decade. First and foremost, occult memetics, because this, in conjunction with the Keck and Pepe sort of thing, a lot of people were looking into the occult. Especially like 1900, The Last President also comes to mind, but Occult Memetics is what I wrote, which is sort of a booklet, a shorter work that explains the basic principles of occultism as applied to memes. People seem to like the work. It's still selling fairly well even now. I don't even know how many paperback copies have sold. I don't think I made this one available digitally for good reasons. I do happen to believe in memetics in a roundabout and general sense, and I explain that within the work. It does actually, the concept of Keck especially, and some of these other forces and entities do have a legitimate spiritual basis. It's sort of like with the Necronomicon, and I can't remember whether I mentioned this. The Necronomicon is a fictional work. It's a fictional grimoire. It's not based on some Book of the Dead. It's not actually like the Evil Dead spell book that'll allow you to bring demons forth from the abyss, but it's based on real spirituality. The rituals there are rudimentarily similar to stuff you'd get in antiquity. The names like the idea of Marduk and some of these other figures are actually, Nurgle actually is mentioned, I believe, are actually from Babylonian or Sumerian and other pagan lore. So in a rudimentary sense, of course, it does have a spiritual reason to exist. Second would be also Fruits of Eden, which is one of the early works that I released. This is the first full-length work that I created. This is an herbal guide, and it's got sections on different plants, botanicals, that are used within the context of negative magic, healing, protective magic in the strictest sense, or in medicine, psychotropics, things used for various purposes, sort of a little bit of the underlying basis for their use. And it's fully illustrated as well. I guess people liked the illustrations decently well. And I was proud of that because this is the first kind of full, true work that I created. I had made some booklets prior, but this was the first one that I really put myself to. And it came out fairly well. I will be releasing another edition of it in the future. So if you want the first edition, link is there. And then third is the Book of Forbidden Knowledge. Now this is one this is a great example of works I didn't expect to blow up and become as popular as they are. This has been consistently my best seller now for several years. I don't know why. If it's something with the content, just somebody posted it online or something. Several thousand copies of this booklet have sold. So it's very popular. It is a grimoire, technically. It does take from the Petit Albert, from some of these other works that were pre-existent. And it is good, it's well written, but it's one of these early 20th century sort of works that were released by companies that created these booklets often on monographic topics like hypnotism, how to bodybuild, the psychic mysteries of the East, something like that. How to improve yourself, how to speak to girls. They had all these little booklets, usually for a young male audience, and this just happens to be one that became very popular. I wonder if Johnson and Company from back in the 1910s realizes that its booklet still has staying power today. I'm not sure. Anyway, as for the future, I'd like to get into more writing of my own works over this next decade. Even though I've got a bunch of editing topics to do, I need to do a few more by the end of the year to hit 260. And I want to do, therefore, 40 over the subsequent year. I want to have at least 300 edited works by the end of this next year. That is doable. Some of these are shorter works. A lot of them are in good condition. It makes it speedier to edit through them line by line. I should be able to pull it off, or at least nearly so. But I also want to write more works. Like, I definitely want to write the sequel to Sickness and Hell, as well as re-editing the first one, because there were a few spelling errors, and the format is not the kind that I now use. And I want to re-edit Fruits of Eden and a few other works. I also want to make the next Morbid Stories. But also, when I was a kid, I've explained that Sickness and Hell and Morbid Stories were roughly spawned from a dream that I had when I was like 15 or something, in which I ate a dehydrated fetus in a box full of like dried apricots and weird stuff like that. And it just felt demonically inspired. But around the same time, I also had dreams, and this must be like a puberty thing, like you're flooded with hormones, you're basically like delusional, and you get weird ideas, and that inspiration can stick with you. I've also gotten ideas for this sort of lore-based, canonical, fictional sword and sorcery world, and series of books attendant to that with like literally wizards and witches and dragons and shit. I even drew up an entire map of this world when I was like 15 or 16, I can't remember, when I was in high school. And I'd like to refine that and literally create a sort of world of my own, sort of like any of these other great worlds that have been created in fiction. I have more in mind a steampunk sort of atmosphere than something that's strictly like elves and orcs. I've been mainly inspired, I would say, by Blaylock, that level of overlapping. Because Elfin Ship is my favorite book of all time. By the way, if you've never read The Elfin Ship by James Blaylock, get a copy. You can get them for $5 off eBay. It's excellent. And I'd like to write something that's comparable to that. I like sort of a comfy, low-key, slightly non-serious sword and sorcery at times. I'm more into joviality and, weird characters that do and say like weird and funny things, especially sometimes outright insane, like a Gollum or something. I find that much better than things that are more dry and dark and arguably at times boring or slow-paced. So I'd like to write a few of those works because I have ideas in my mind for them. They just have to flesh themselves out over time. Don't try to force it if you're writing books. You're up against a deadline, maybe that's one thing, but if you've got the leisure, you should let it flow on its own. It doesn't matter how long it takes, because if it's fated to be written, it will. I think it would be interesting. So there's my end-of-decade literary update. Things are going well. I hope that they continue to. I'm going to keep up with it. If anything, over the next 10 years, I expect to edit and write and even in video form, do more work than in the last decade. I expect to redouble my efforts in order to maximize productivity. I can be a brutal taskmaster of myself. I'd rather be my own brutal boss than have to deal with even a good boss that was external to myself, because I couldn't do that sort of thing. You ask me to get up for a 9 to 5 and I'll be dead in the morning. You're not going to get as much productivity as if I get proper sleep, slug down my coffee, and immediately sit to my work. That's just sort of the way I operate. I'll outpace anybody work-wise as long as you let me be me. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting decade, onward to the 20s. That's about all. Peace out.